his diary somewhere in his middle teens when his father died and left no written record of what he had known and seen and done. And so my grandfather decided to write down as much as he could write down about his family, his town, and himself through the years. And as we know in our reading of the diary at Rosh Hashanah and Pesach, it was quite detailed at times, and sometimes it was very, very interesting. I learned things about my family that I didn't know. For example, I always thought my father was the oldest son, his father was the oldest son, and I was the oldest son. So we had we have more about my father in my grandfather's book than we have my father.
And I'll tell you when to start talking. Okay. Okay, wait. First of all, today is
19th of December, 2001.
My parents' anniversary was on the 19th of December. Okay, go ahead, Charlie.
Today, the 19th of December, 2001, the anniversary of Ruth's...
I already said that. It's being recorded.
It's
you don't
being
have
recorded.
to. You don't have to repeat.
Okay. On this little ketta of my life, I will try to explain my relationship with the game of football. It was a passion which lasted many years until I finished all connection with football in 1952-53. I started playing football, I was about 13 years old. We had a club in the neighborhood called the Wildcats, and I played football, sandlot football. I was the only Jew among non-Jews, and I lived on Jew Street, Shavenson Street.
Where was this?
Next to Jew in Fall River, Massachusetts. We lived in Jew Street, next to Jew Field, and I was one of the good Jews.
Why were you one of the good Jews?
Because Jews were not liked. It was an anti-Semitic town. We lived there. This was in the late 30s. In my town in Fall River, Father Coughlin had his newspaper sold on the streets.
Why were you considered one of the good Jews?
Because I was a nice guy.
Are you a nice guy? Was it because you played football?
I suppose because I played football, yeah.
All right.
I did not play football in high school in my freshman year. I tried out for the team with spring practice, and I was around about 2 weeks or so, and then I broke my finger during a fist fight. The next year,
What kind of fist fight did you have?
One of the kids on the next street. I hit him with my fist, and I split.
Do you remember why?
Do I know why I fought?
Do you remember? Yeah, just.
Yeah, I remember.
Okay.
Why I fought with him?
Oh,
no.
yeah. Oh, okay.
But I fought with him.
Okay.
I don't know. But I hit his head with my fist, and the thumb. I got.
Hold on 1 second. Stop. Wait. Okay.
My sophomore year in high school, I tried out for the football team, and as each person was chosen to be on the team, he was given a uniform, shoulder pads, hip pads, pants, etc., shoes. And I waited, and I didn't get it. And I kept going out and going out. They didn't say not to come, so I came. Finally, one day, I went up to the assistant coach. I remember him. His name was Fred DeGatta, a nice, pleasant man. I says, Fred, what's the chance of my making the team? He says, go get a uniform. So I was on the team.
Does that mean had you not asked them, you wouldn't have gotten a uniform?
I don't know. All I know is until they told me not to come, I was going to come. Then the interesting
Sounds
thing...
like one of your children. Go ahead.
It's interesting that year, the football team was taken up to see a Boston College game toward the end of the season. There were 2 people there was no room for on the bus, me and Charlie Parsons. Interestingly enough, in our senior year, we were the captains of the team. Fortunately, the coach of my sophomore year, Steve Naraki, stopped being a coach, or became assistant coach, and a wonderful football coach called Luke Urban took over at high school. Immediately, he changed my position from being a guard into being a center. Why? I don't know.
Well, he must have seen something that you didn't, or whatever.
Whatever. Anyway, somewhere after the first game, the regular center, a traditional football player from the past whose brother was a great hero in the school, Jackie Carey, was kicked off the team for being insubordinate. And who becomes the coach at the first team center? Yours truly, my junior year.
How big were you at that time?
In my junior year, I was 16. I must have weighed something like 160 pounds.
That's not bad at 16.
No, not really. Not very big.
But today you probably wouldn't have gotten on a team. You probably weren't big enough.
It just depends.
It's a different time.
The size is important only if you don't know how to use it. If you hit the person right when you're 160 or 170, they go down. With a sledgehammer of 10 pounds, you can break or put down a railroad. So the size is important. Equal size against bigger size, the bigger size one, equal ability is obviously has it. But if you are well trained, you know what you're doing, you use your body correctly, the size is not nearly as important. The question of maneuverability and use of your body is more important most of the time than size. Of course, to digress, when I went to college in Boston in 1946 after the war, I went to see a Boston Yanks football game. And I watched the centers in particular, and the center of the Boston Yanks was a fellow named Domnanovich. He was an All-American in Alabama the year I was in...
Is that the one we saw?
No. He was an All-American in Alabama in 1942 when I played my senior year. And he was 210, 220 pounds. At my maximum weight was 180, 185, 178. And I watched them beat him. They at that time, the theory was that you went through to the quarterback through the center. So they put the biggest defensive lineman against the center, and as soon as he centered the ball, they would pound him. They would lift him with a forearm shiver like this, and he would go a foot off the ground. After the first quarter, they took him out of the game, and I decided that I was just not going to be big enough for football.
Okay, that was a digression. Back to high school.
And going back to high school, we had a pretty good team in my junior year. My senior year, we had a much better team. We finished very nicely. We had a traditional team that we played against New Bedford. We'd lost to them 12 years in a row. And my year, we tied them at 12-12. Anyway, the first game of the season, we went to Fairfield. I don't remember exactly. And you understand that in football, the captain is important, not for anything he does, but he's the one who makes the decisions. If there is a penalty, he decides to accept the penalty or not to accept the penalty. He's the one that decides on a kickoff when they toss the coin whether he takes the right side of the field or the left side of the field. And all of a sudden the coach says, Keusch will be captain. And I don't think my head jerked, but I was absolutely astounded. And I think I walked in air out to the field, and when they tossed the coin up, I'm not sure what I did or what I didn't say, but I talked to the official. I said, yes, sir. I remained captain for 4 games, and after that, Charlie Parsons, the other fella when we were sophomores, who wasn't good enough to make the trip, he was the captain.
Yeah.
That's the way things work in high school. The difference between a sophomore and a senior is significant. You're 15 against 17. In college, the same thing. In regular college, you're 18 and 19 against 21 and 22. So, well, you go in as a freshman, unless there are exceptionals. There are men, there are boys who are at 15 are men. This is the thing. But most boys don't reach their maturity until their junior and even their senior year. And then some of them not even until afterwards. I went into the Army, of course. Football came to an end.
Yeah.
And
give me when.
I went into the Army, and I graduated from high school in June of 1943. September 10th, 1943, I went into the Army.
Gives us the next Schlav if you want to talk about the Army after the
No,
football.
no, go back to football.
Okay, yeah,
all
okay,
right?
Send
Football passed away, was no interest. We had basic training 13 weeks during the football season. I knew nothing about football, gone. I went to college under the special program to the University of Missouri.
Wait a minute. We forgot something here. You forgot something here. You played football in the Army in
That's
Europe.
what I'm coming to.
You said after the Army you went,
Oh, I'm sorry.
right?
After basic training, I'm sorry.
Oh, so, okay.
I'm sorry. After basic training, we
That's what I'm
went
here
to the
for.
University of Missouri for a semester. We were drummed. They decided to disband the program. We went into the 66.
What program?
The ASTP
Which you didn't say.
we were talking about football. And
So what? But you're throwing things out. So just mention it.
This Army Specialized. You going there?
Of course, I have shut the
The
camera.
Army Specialized Training Program. We were supposed to be officers, gentlemen, and engineers. We had taken special tests for this when we were still in high school, and that's one of the reasons that I volunteered as early as I did to be in this program. And of course, we had infantry training at Fort Benning, which was the infantry school for the Army. We went to Missouri. The Army decided to end the program at the end of March of 1944. They ended our program, the ASTP. They ended a good many of the air cadet training programs, and into the 66th Division went 7, 8, 9,000 men whose IQs, Army Ground Force Training Program scores, like an IQ. We were all 115 and higher. In order to
Psychometry of a kind.
psychometry. To be an officer, you had to have 110. So this is probably the smartest infantry division in the history of the world.
You can keep on talking.
I was at 140, which was okay. It wasn't as high as a genius, but it was close.
You think it's a genius?
Hi there. In Little Rock, where we went, Little Rock, Arkansas, while it was a springtime, and there I see guys throwing a football around with football uniforms, and this was the 66th Division football team. And I saw them, didn't mean very much to me, and that was the end of my football in America until we went overseas. And after the war, now we're talking about 1945, the war ended, our war ended in May of 1945. The war on the other side of the world ended in August of 1945. And somewhere after, in August, the word comes down, the 66th Division is forming a football team. All people who want to go are asked to show up on such and such a time to get to go there. And I went. I and one other guy from my company went, and we went to this place in a field. We had tents, we had everything waiting for us, and there must have been something like 200 people out there, 200 people. And there were high school players, college players from all over the country. One guy, a pro, played for the Chicago Bears. Chicago Bears was the greatest football team that was at that time. That's when they were called the Bears with Sid Luckman. And they had beaten the Redskins 73-0 in the season of 72 before we all went into the Army. And here was this guy Basie. Basie had arms that were bigger than my legs. He weighed about 210, 215. Somebody says to him, "No, Basie, you're going to play for the Bears, the first team when you go back?" He says, "No, I'm too small." Anyway, eventually, 100 out of all of these 200 some odd people, maybe 80, 90 remained. And our coach, Tony Cavello, did something that nobody ever did before or since. This was a period when there were no substitute teams. There was no offensive team or defensive team or kicking team. You went into the game and you stayed in the game till you were taken out. And if you were taken out in a certain quarter, you couldn't go back in that quarter.
That means that one person, if he was part of the team, played the entire game no matter what.
Until he was replaced.
Until he was replaced.
That's right. He played offense and defense. Kicking teams, defensive, everything. Anyway, we got to our first game, and we said, Tony picked up, there were 3 teams. There was a team with what's his name, from the University, All-American from the University of California was on the first 11. Fred Fletcher, who played pro ball in San Diego Chargers, which was just below the major leagues, the National Football League, he was the center of the second thing. And who was the center of the third thing? Dave Keusch, high school, Durfee High School, 1943. This was so exciting. Here, and he says, Tony goes in and says, we are going to work the following way. Every 5 minutes, we're changing teams. No matter what the situation is on the field, every 5 minutes, there were 15-minute quarters in those days. I don't remember what, I think it's the same thing today. So now, then we come to the field, and we played in Marseille. There must have been 25, 30,000 people there. And he ends up and says, oh, by the way, the captains will be the centers. So here we go out, and here we have, and we had players. We had players, as I say, from every player outside of me and Jack Hurton and a couple of others. Jack Hurton, of course, are my old friend, and Terry Callahan, another fellow that I eventually ended up going to New Mexico with. They were all college players, and here Dave Keusch, 20 years old, was the captain of this marvelous team. We won, of course. We won pretty good. And then all of a sudden the team was broken up. Why? The war was over. People was being sent home. All on a basis of a point system. You got a point for every month in the Army. You got an extra point for overseas. You got 5 points for every medal. That's why medals were important. It wasn't important that you got a silver star or you got a bronze star. It was 5 points. You went home sooner. Anyway, most of the football team went home. And the rest of us, as a football team, went up with the rest of the 66th Division, which was disbanded, to the 42nd Division in Austria. And so we went up there by plane, and we went up by train, and we went up not with with the regular company personnel. We went up there as a football team. Of course, we got to Austria in this beautiful a vacation town called Bad Gastein, some hour or so from Salzburg. Also, Salzburg is the town of
Mozart.
What?
Mozart.
Mozart. The Mozart candy,
Kugel,
the Mozart
music.
That's Salzburg. And what do we find there? They got a football team up there for the 42nd Division. And they got a paper there, and we're riding on a train up, and I read the paper, and they got 2 other guys at center there. One weighs 210 pounds, and the other guy weighs 215 pounds. And I'm going up there with Fletcher. He was the pro from San Diego. And I say, Fletch, what am I going to do with these big guys? He says, wait till you see how they play. Size isn't everything. And he's right. So they said they were centers. Fletcher and I went up there. We eventually, they tried to pull the same thing of having the 42nd players and the 66 players, and we would alternate one. Eventually, we were all coalesced, and of course the 66th Division team was the better players. We were good. And we played, I forget, Jack Hurton remembers everything about the games when he was here visiting us in the country a number of months ago, and he was telling me things I don't remember. All I know is we played in Nuremberg. We went to Czechoslovakia. We played there. We played a couple of other teams. I don't remember. In Bad Gastein, our football field, of course, was covered with snow. So we practiced in the snow. We lived in a hotel, and each of us had a private room. I had a private room. You know what it is to be a private room after being in the army, living with people in little dugouts, 4 and 5, where you can't turn over or anything. where
Hey,
you live
man,
in
you
tents. You live in tents with 6 or 8 or 10 people.
It wasn't the Band of Brothers. You
It wasn't
had
a
nothing
band
to
of
play,
brothers.
play
I
about.
had a room. No, more than that. I had a personal servant. We would come from the field. I think it was by truck. We didn't walk. We would go by truck, army truck. Took us from the field, which was up higher in Bad Gastein. Took us down to the hotel. We went up to the hotel in our football cleats, in our uniforms. We took off the uniforms. We took the sweaty underwear and jockstrap, and we threw it on the floor. And we went to take, couldn't take showers. We had to take a bath, because these were thermal baths. And afterwards we were wondering how they would affect you. Some sort of thing in the water. Bad Gastein was very famous for this. And, of course, by the time I came back after lunch, my underwear was cleaned, T-shirt,
Just
jockstrap.
like at home. Let me stop here now for a minute.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
In retrospect, talking about my Army football team, this was obviously the best group of players and best teams that I ever played with. I got out of the Army in 1946 in May, and of course I and Johnny and Donald and all of the people we know were going to college. I automatically decided on Boston University because I'd won a scholarship there, not a football scholarship, before the war. And I was going there. They had a physical education program. I was crazy to be a football coach, and that's where I was going. And then somebody suggested, why don't I talk to the football coach at Brown University in Providence. All the fellows were going to Brown. Donald went there, Gerald went there. No, Gerald went to Massachusetts. Johnny went there. Oh, lots of people that I knew, and they were all going to Brown. I went up and I talked to the football coach, Rip Engel, and I told him, you know, who I was and what I was, and he says, yeah, come on, I'll get you in, there's no problem. We want you to play for us. Who was Rip Engel? He, after this year of Brown, or the next year after the year, he went on to coach at Penn State and became one of the top coaches in the country. And he says, you don't need physical education to be a football coach. And I poo-pooed it. And in retrospect, instead of getting a degree at Brown instead of New Mexico, and being home when my father was sick, I may have made a serious error. On the other hand, if I had changed my lifestyle and moved around and done anything different, I might not have met Ruth, and all my 5 children might not be. So I don't think I really made a mistake, not life-wise, but in practical sense, Brown was definitely a higher caliber school than Boston University or New Mexico A&M. When I went out for the football team in Boston, there were again about 130 to 150 players there, came out. And it's amazing. There were more all-state players, that is all-state Massachusetts, than you could put anywhere. Don't forget, this was the graduating class of 41, 42, 43, 44, 45. 5 different years of all-state players in every position, everyone you can imagine.
By the way, did this happen in basketball as well?
Must have.
Must have.
Must have. All, you got 5 years of players coming back from the time the war started until all of us got out of the Army in 45 and 46. Anyway, I survived. I stayed on the team and was not very successful. Part of the reason was, I don't know, the coach and I, the line coach and I didn't get along very well, or he didn't think very much of me. In fact, after not playing, being involved at all for a couple of games, we had a scrimmage, and I made tackles all over the place as a lineman, not as a linebacker. And everybody was telling me, oh, you're going to be coming to the game. We're going to be playing in some team in Bridgeport or Connecticut. Well, I don't remember. And I didn't go, and just as well because I got poison ivy on my face. And instead of going away and visiting on a football team, I bakoshi got home. I got off, took a bus from Boston to Fall River, and took another bus to my house. And I walked in my house, and here I was. I was an Army veteran of 2.5 years. I was away at college. I felt I was a man in every way. And I got into the house. My mother looks at my face, and she says, lie down on the couch. She took the lights out. She called a doctor. And you know what I felt? Oh, everything passed out. Mama's taking care of everything, and all my troubles went away. Oh, I don't know what the doctor gave me or didn't give me for the face, for the poison ivy, and Boston changed. On the Boston team with me was a fellow I played with in the Army called Terry Callahan. He only stayed on the team for about a month or so. Big fella. He was about almost as tall as me. I weighed 180, 185. He weighed 220, 230. Nicest guy you want to know. Good, fine fella. And anyway, he got in touch with New Mexico A&M. And he says to me, come on, let's go down there. They'll pay our way down, and we'll make a little money down there. Meanwhile, I had studied physical education, and I was thoroughly and disgusted with the program. I learned nothing there. The only thing decent was that I had a decent English teacher who improved my writing fantastically. But when I went into the bureaucratic office at Boston University and says, I want to change my program. I want to go from physical education to business administration. This woman looked at me and she says, you got to stay there a year. You are obviously a maladjusted veteran. So Callahan and I got on a train, not by plane. We're on the train for 2.5 days. By the way, when I told my father, I told him on a Friday, I came home from BU, I says, I'm going to New Mexico. I'm leaving on Sunday. And he looks at me and he says, you couldn't go any further away?
Could have gone to Australia.
We got to New Mexico, and we came 3 weeks late for registration. Of course, they started their school soon, and they said, you can't register. But the football team has power. We registered, and we started school 3 weeks late. And of course, we got right on to football practice, and people wanted